10 Golden Age actresses who loved being with younger men. Long before the term cougar entered our vocabulary, several of Hollywood's most glamorous Golden Age actresses were quietly defying social conventions by pursuing relationships with significantly younger men. While studios carefully crafted public images of these women as either wholesome ingenues or respectable matrons, behind closed doors, many were pioneering a romantic independence that would have scandalized their fans. These relationships weren't just brief flings, but often meaningful partnerships that offered these successful women something their same age or older counterparts couldn't, relationships where their professional accomplishment and personal authority weren't threatening. Yet despite their wealth, fame, and power, these women faced extraordinary scrutiny and often cruel judgment for choices that would have been completely unremarkable had the genders been reversed. What's particularly revealing is how studio publicity departments worked over time to either hide these age gap relationships entirely or completely rewrite the narratives, sometimes even falsifying the actresses' ages to make the gap seem less significant, creating public fictions that many film historians still repeat as fact today. But here's what makes these Golden Age relationships truly fascinating. They weren't simply about physical attraction to younger partners, as modern stereotypes might suggest. Many of these actresses had endured controlling relationships with older men early in their careers, including studio executives, directors, and producers who wielded enormous power over them professionally while demanding personal submission. Their later pursuit of younger partners often represented a reclaiming of power and agency after years of being controlled by the Hollywood patriarchy. Perhaps most surprisingly, several of these age gap relationships were actually among Hollywood's most successful and enduring unions, lasting decades while same-age celebrity marriages around them crumbled. The untold story behind these pioneering women isn't just about their romantic preferences. It's about how they strategically navigated a deeply sexist industry, create personal lives that offered them the respect, emotional support their extraordinary careers deserved. Their relationships with younger men weren't signs of desperation, as gossip columnists often suggested, but deliberate choices that provided genuine partnership without requiring them to diminish their own power or success. So who were these boundary-breaking Golden Age actresses who found fulfillment with significantly younger partners, and what do their stories reveal about how powerful women navigated romance in an era of rigid gender expectations? Let's explore 10 legendary leading ladies whose relationships with younger men challenged Hollywood's double standards long before such pairings became commonplace. 1. Gloria Swanson, the silent queen who rewrote the rules. Gloria Swanson reigned as one of Hollywood's most powerful stars during the silent era, commanding unprecedented salaries and creative control over her films. Her professional dominance extended to her personal life, where she consistently chose partners significantly younger than herself, a pattern that both reflected and reinforced her determination to live on her own terms. Swanson's most significant relationship with a younger man began in 1945 when, at age 46, she became involved with 32-year-old William Dufty, a writer and journalist who would later become her sixth husband. Their 14-year age gap raised eyebrows even in relatively liberal Hollywood circles, particularly since Swanson made no attempt to hide either the relationship or the age difference. What makes Swanson's case particularly fascinating is how deliberately she flouted social conventions around aging actresses. At a time when women over 40 were expected to gracefully fade from both the screen and public consciousness, Swanson not only continued pursuing high-profile projects, culminating in her Oscar-nominated comeback in Sunset Boulevard at age 50, but openly embraced her attraction to younger men. In her remarkably candid 1980 autobiography, Swanson on Swanson, she addressed her preference directly. "I've always been drawn to younger men because they aren't burdened by outdated ideas about how a successful woman should behave. The men my age wanted me to shrink myself to soothe their egos. Why would I do that when I could have partners who celebrated rather than resented my achievements?" What's particularly significant about Swanson's relationship with Dufty is how it defied the gold digger narratives often attached to younger men with older, wealthy women. Dufty was an accomplished writer in his own right, who collaborated with Swanson on her groundbreaking health food advocacy and co-authored her autobiography. Their partnership was intellectual and creative, as well as romantic, a genuine meeting of minds that continued until Swanson Swanson's death in 1983. Swanson's friend and fellow actress Colleen Moore later revealed that Swanson had a deliberate philosophy about age in relationships. Gloria told me once that she'd rather be the older partner because it allowed her to define the relationship on her terms. She'd spent her early years with controlling older men in the industry and had no intention of repeating that power imbalance in her personal life. 2. Joan Crawford, Beyond Mommy Dearest, to Younger Lovers. Joan Crawford's relationships with younger men revealed a different side of the actress than either her carefully constructed studio image or the later Mommy Dearest portrayal would suggest. Throughout her later career, Crawford consistently chose partners 10 to 20 years her junior, creating a pattern that film historian Janine Bassinger described as a deliberate reclaiming of power after years of studio control. Crawford's most significant age gap relationship began in 1955 when, at age 49, she became involved with 38-year-old Pepsi executive Alfred Steele, whom she would marry later that year. While an 11-year difference might seem modest by today's standards, in the 1950s, particularly with the woman as the older partner, such a gap generated considerable gossip. MGM publicity chief Howard Strickling later revealed that the studio had attempted to pressure Crawford into ending the relationship, fearing it would damage her carefully crafted image as a dignified matron. What makes Crawford's relationships with younger men particularly significant is how they coincided with her professional transitions. As her leading lady status began to wane in the late 1940s, Crawford strategically recalibrated both her career and personal life, taking control of her image in ways that challenged Hollywood conventions. Her marriage to Steele represented not just a romantic choice, but a business alliance that helped her transition into her role as Pepsi ambassador after her film career began to decline. Crawford's correspondence with her friend director George Cukor, uncovered in 2015, reveals her candid thoughts about choosing younger partners. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by powerful older men telling me what to do. Studio heads, directors, producers. In my personal life, at least, I prefer being the one with experience and authority. The younger men in my life appreciate rather than resent that dynamic." What's particularly interesting about Crawford's pattern is how it reflected her understanding of Hollywood's gendered power structures. As actress Donna Reed later recalled from a conversation with Crawford, "Joan told me that Hollywood men her age had spent decades being catered to by younger women and couldn't handle a female equal, let alone a female superior. She said younger men weren't yet spoiled by that system and could actually see her as a person rather than a threat." In a remarkably candid 1969 interview, when asked about her relationship with a man nearly 20 years her junior, she stated, "Men my age want nursemaids, not partners. I've earned the right to be with someone who has energy and a fresh perspective. Why should men be the only ones allowed to rejuvenate themselves through younger companionship?" 3. Marlene Dietrich, the international icon who defied categories. Marlene Dietrich's sophisticated European sensibilities allowed her to approach relationships with a fluidity that shocked American audiences. Her romantic life included significant relationships with both men and women, but one consistent pattern emerged. She primarily chose male partners who were substantially younger than herself, often by 10 to 15 years or more. Dietrich's most famous relationship with a younger man began in 1942, when, at age 40, she began a passionate affair with 27-year-old French actor Jean Gabin during the filming of Martin Roumaniac. The 13-year age gap generated considerable publicity, particularly since Dietrich made no attempt to hide either the relationship or her position as the more established star. What makes Dietrich's case particularly fascinating is how her European background influenced her approach to age in relationships. As her daughter Maria Riva noted in her memoir, Marlene Dietrich, The Life, "My mother considered American attitudes about older women with younger men primitive and provincial. In Europe, particularly in Germanic and French cultural circles, such relationships were viewed as natural. The experienced, culturally sophisticated woman initiating a younger man was almost a cultural archetype." Dietrich's correspondence with her longtime friend and occasional lover Ernest Hemingway, published in 2003, reveals her deliberate strategy regarding younger partners. "The young men in my life never knew me when I was struggling or uncertain. They encounter me as I am now, confident, established, financially independent. This creates a dynamic where my accomplishments are simply accepted facts, rather than intimidating obstacles to be overcome." What's particularly significant about Dietrich's relationships with younger men is how they reflected her rejection of conventional gender roles. Unlike many of her Hollywood contemporaries, who maintained publicly traditional personas despite private unconventionality, Dietrich openly embraced an androgynous image that challenged expectations about how women, particularly aging women, should behave. Her preference for younger partners was just one aspect of her broader refusal to conform to American ideas about proper feminine behavior. As Dietrich herself wrote in a 1960 letter to her daughter, "America wants its older women to disappear, or at least have the good grace to pair off with even older men. I refuse to participate in this fiction. I have earned my position and my pleasures, and I will enjoy both with partners of my choosing, regardless of what society thinks appropriate for a woman of my age." 4. Mae West, the pioneer who created the template. Mae West stands alone among Golden Age actresses for how explicitly she built her entire persona around her preference for younger men. From her earliest Broadway successes through her Hollywood career and beyond, West not only pursued younger partners in her personal life, but made this preference a central element of her public image, a radical choice for a woman born in 1893. West's most significant relationship began in 1954, when, at age 61, she became involved with 32-year-old Chester Rabinski, later known as Paul Novak, a former Mr. California who had performed in her nightclub act. Their 29-year age difference would raise eyebrows even today, but in the conservative 1950s, it generated substantial criticism. Remarkably, the relationship lasted until West's death in 1980, a 26-year partnership that defied critics' expectations that it would be a brief fling. What makes West's case particularly fascinating is how she weaponized humor to deflect criticism of her preference. Rather than hiding her relationships with younger men or allowing herself to be shamed for them, West incorporated her predilection into her comedic persona. Her famous quips, "I like a man who's good, but not too good, for the good die young, and I hate a dead one," and "A man has $100, and you leave him with $2, that's subtraction," used humor to normalize her pursuit of younger partners. West's business manager and confidant Stanley Musgrove revealed in his memoir that West had a specific philosophy about age in relationships. "Mae told me that she preferred younger men because they hadn't yet been taught to fear strong women. She said men her age had spent decades being catered to by subservient wives and girlfriends and couldn't handle a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it." What's particularly significant about West's relationship with Novak is how it contradicted stereotypes about older woman, younger man dynamics. Far from being a transactional arrangement, as gossip columnists suggested, their partnership showed remarkable depth and loyalty. Novak, who had his own career and financial stability, remained devoted to West throughout her final years, including several health crises. After her death, he revealed, "Mae was the most extraordinary person I ever met. Our age difference meant nothing compared to our compatibility. She gave me intellectual stimulation and life experience. I gave her energy and a fresh perspective. We were equals despite the years between us." West's friend and fellow actress Sophie Tucker later shared that West had explicitly connected her preference for younger men to her business acumen. "Mae told me once, I approach my love life like my investments. I look for growth potential, not established blue chips about to decline in value." She was always ahead of her time in seeing relationships as partnerships that should benefit both parties, rather than arrangements where women traded beauty for security. 5. Barbara Stanwyck, the tough-minded star's younger loves. Barbara Stanwyck's sharp intelligence and no-nonsense approach to her career extended to her personal life, where she consistently chose partners who were younger than herself, a pattern that began after her divorce from older husband Frank Fay, whose alcoholism and resentment of her success had led to an allegedly abusive relationship. Stanwyck's most significant age gap relationship began in 1936, when at age 29, she began dating 23-year-old Robert Taylor, whom she would marry in 1939. While a 6-year difference might seem modest, in 1936, it was considered a significant age gap, the context of 1930s Hollywood, where women typically married older, established men. Their relationship generated considerable gossip, particularly since Stanwyck was the more established star when they met. What makes Stanwyck's case particularly significant is how MGM attempted to hide the age gap by actually falsifying Taylor's birth date in publicity materials, making him appear appear 2 years older than he actually was. This studio manipulation reveals how threatening the concept of an older woman with a younger man was to Hollywood's carefully constructed gender narratives. Stanwyck's correspondence with her friend director Frank Capra reveals her strategic thinking about choosing younger partners. "I've seen what happens to actresses who marry powerful older men in this town. Their careers become secondary, their ambitions get suffocated. I prefer someone who's still hungry, still building, someone who understands that my work is as important as his." After her divorce from Taylor in 1952, Stanwyck maintained a pattern of relationships with younger men, though she never remarried. Her final significant relationship began in 1963 when, at age 56, she became involved with her 44-year-old The Big Valley co-star Peter Breck, a 12-year age gap that she made no attempt to conceal, despite the potential impact on her image as television's matriarchal Victoria Barker. What's particularly fascinating about Stanwyck's preference for younger men is how it reflected her larger refusal to conform to Hollywood expectations for actresses. As film historian Janine Basinger noted, Stanwyck approached relationships the same way she approached her career, with clear-eyed pragmatism and a refusal to accept limitations based on gender. She recognized early that younger men were more likely to respect her independence and accommodate her career priorities. In a remarkably candid 1981 interview with film critic Roger Ebert, Stanwyck addressed her preference directly. "I've never understood why it's considered normal for men to choose younger partners, but somehow desperate when women do the same. The simple fact is that men who haven't yet achieved everything they want tend to be more interesting, more energetic, and less threatened by a successful woman. It's not about looking for someone to control. It's about finding someone who doesn't need to control you." As we continue exploring these pioneering relationships, patterns emerge that challenge conventional narratives about older women with younger partners. Far from being desperate, last relationships, many of these pairings showed remarkable longevity and mutual benefit, suggesting these women had discovered relationship dynamics that worked precisely because they defied gender expectations of their era. 6. Claudette Colbert, the sophisticated star's secret. Claudette Colbert's elegant, sophisticated screen presence masked a private life that would have shocked her fans, particularly her consistent preference for significantly younger partners. While publicly maintaining an image of reserved propriety, Colbert's personal choices revealed a woman determined to define relationships on her own terms. Colbert's most significant age gap relationship began in 1935 when, at age 32, she married 28-year-old Dr. Joel Pressman. While a 4-year difference seems minimal, studio publicity departments of the era routinely subtracted years from actresses' ages while adding years to their younger partners' ages to minimize public awareness of such gaps. According to Paramount publicist Bob Thomas's later revelations, Colbert was actually 38 when she married the 28-year-old Pressman, a decade gap that the studio worked diligently to conceal. What makes Colbert's case particularly interesting is how she used her carefully cultivated image of sophistication to deflect attention from her personal choices. As her friend and fellow actress Myrna Loy later revealed, Claudette understood that if you maintained a sufficient aura of mystery and elegance, people hesitated to question your private life. She deliberately cultivated her image as the epitome of taste and refinement, precisely to create space for her to live as she pleased behind closed doors. Colbert's marriage to Pressman lasted until his death in 1968, a 33-year relationship that defied Hollywood's expectations of brief, publicity-driven marriages. Their genuine partnership demonstrated how age gap relationships could succeed when built on mutual respect rather than conformity to gender expectations. What's particularly significant about Colbert's relationship with Pressman is how she maintained the power dynamic throughout their marriage. As her niece revealed in a 2014 interview, Aunt Claudette ran that household with absolute authority. Uncle Joel was brilliant in his field, but in their marriage, her career took precedence, her schedule determined their lives, and her financial success supported their lifestyle. Yet rather than resenting this reversal of traditional gender roles, he seemed to admire her accomplishments and enjoy the life her success made possible. In private correspondence with her friend William Powell, Colbert addressed her preference for a younger partner. "There's something liberating about being with a man who knew me only as an established star. He never knew the struggling, uncertain Claudette who had to compromise and accommodate to build a career. With Joel, I've always been exactly who I am, successful, decisive, and in command of my life. Perhaps that's why we've outlasted almost every other marriage in Hollywood." 7. Norma Shearer, the MGM Queen's younger consorts. Norma Shearer's position as Queen of MGM, reinforced by her marriage to production chief Irving Thalberg, gave her unprecedented power in Hollywood's golden golden age. After Thalberg's death in 1936, Shearer's romantic choices revealed a woman determined to reclaim personal happiness on her own terms, primarily through relationships with significantly younger men. Shearer's most notable age gap relationship began in 1942 when, at age 40, she became involved with 27-year-old ski instructor Martin Arouget, whom she would marry later that year. Their 13-year age difference generated considerable industry gossip, particularly since Shearer made no attempt to hide either the relationship or the age gap. What makes Shearer's case particularly fascinating is how her status as Irving Thalberg's widow had placed her on a pedestal of Hollywood royalty, a position from which her choice of a much younger, non-industry partner represented a significant departure. As her friend and fellow actress Anita Luce later recalled, after years of being Mrs. Irving Thalberg, Norma wanted something completely different. Someone unconnected to the industry, someone who saw her as a woman rather than a Hollywood institution. Shearer's diaries, partially published in 2011, reveal her deliberate strategy regarding younger partners. The men my age in this town are either power brokers seeking trophies or former suitors who now find me intimidating because of my connection to Irving's legacy. Martin approaches me without that baggage. He sees me simply as the woman I am now, not as an extension of my late husband's position. What's particularly significant about Shearer's relationship with Arouget is its longevity. They remained happily married until her death in 1983, a 41-year partnership that defied critics' expectations that it would be a brief post-widowhood fling. Their genuine connection demonstrated how age gap relationships could succeed when built on mutual interests and respect rather than industry politics. Shearer's friend and fellow actress Helen Hayes later revealed that Shearer had explicitly connected her choice of a younger partner to her desire for a different kind of relationship. Norma told me that with Irving, despite his genius and kindness, she had always been Thalberg's wife first and herself second. With Martin, she could finally be simply Norma, not the actress, not the widow, just herself. She said that difference was worth whatever society might think about their age gap. 8. Joan Blondell, the working actress and her young producer. Joan Blondell's earthy, relatable screen presence masked a personal life that defied convention, particularly in her preference for younger partners after 2 marriages to older, controlling men had ended in divorce. Her romantic choices revealed a woman determined to find happiness on her own terms, regardless of Hollywood's expectations. Blondell's most significant age gap relationship began in 1947 when, at age 41, she married 31-year-old producer Mike Todd. Their 10-year age difference generated industry gossip, particularly since Blondell was the more established name when they met. Todd, who would later marry Elizabeth Taylor, was still building his reputation as a producer when he became involved with Blondell. What makes Blondell's case particularly interesting is how she connected her preference for younger partners to her working-class background and practical nature. Unlike stars who came from privileged backgrounds or entered Hollywood very young, Blondell had worked in vaudeville from childhood and approached relationships with pragmatic honesty. As her son, Norman Powell, revealed in his memoir, Mom used to say that she'd spent her youth taking care of older men, first her father in vaudeville, then her first 2 husbands. She had no interest in being a caretaker again and preferred partners with vitality and optimism. Blondell's romance with Todd was tumultuous but passionate, lasting until 1950. What's significant about their relationship is how it represented Blondell's determination to pursue happiness on her own terms after years of putting her career and family obligations first. Despite the age gap, Todd's ambition and energy matched Blondell's own drive, creating a dynamic partnership rather than the unequal relationship she'd experienced with older men. In her unpublished autobiography, portions of which were shared by her family in 2018, Blondell wrote candidly about her preference. I've worked continuously since age 3, first in vaudeville, then in Hollywood. I never had a carefree youth. Perhaps that's why I'm drawn to men with youthful energy and optimism. They remind me of what I missed and help me experience it belatedly. The men my age seem tired, jaded, and entitled. They've had their adventures and now want someone to make them comfortable. I'm not interested in that role. After her divorce from Todd, Blondell continued her pattern of relationships with younger men, though she never remarried. Her final significant relationship began in 1965 when, at age 59, she became involved with a 42-year-old businessman, a 17-year age gap that she made no attempt to conceal despite potential impact on her career as she transitioned transition to character roles. What's particularly significant about Blondel's romantic choices is how they reflected her larger approach to life: honest, unpretentious, and free from concern about superficial social judgments. As fellow actress Betty Hutton noted, Joan never pretended to be anything other than exactly who she was. If she wanted a younger man, she pursued him. If people gossiped, she didn't give a damn. That authenticity is why so many of us adored her. She was real in an industry built on illusion. 9. Ruth Chatterton, the intellectual who chose youth. Ruth Chatterton's transition from silent film star to sophisticated leading lady of early talkies was matched by her evolution in personal relationships, moving from traditional marriages to older established men toward partnerships with significantly younger talents who matched her intellectual curiosity and adventurous spirit. Chatterton's most notable age gap relationship began in 1932, when at age 39 she married 29-year-old actor George Brent. Their 10-year age difference caused considerable industry comment, particularly since Chatterton was the more established star when they met on the set of The Rich Are Always With Us. Brent, who would later briefly marry Bette Davis, was still building his career when he became involved with Chatterton. What makes Chatterton's case particularly fascinating is how her intellectual interests influenced her romantic choices. Unlike many actresses of her era, Chatterton was a published novelist, licensed pilot, and theater producer whose wide-ranging talents extended far beyond her screen career. As her friend and fellow actress Kay Francis noted in her diaries, Ruth seeks stimulation above all else: intellectual, creative, and yes, physical. She finds younger men more willing to explore new ideas, take risks, and challenge conventions. Men her age tend to be set in their ways and intimidated by her multifaceted achievements. Chatterton's marriage to Brent lasted only 3 years, but she continued her pattern of relationships with younger partners. Her final significant relationship began in 1950, when, at age 57, she became involved with a 38-year-old British businessman, a 19-year age gap that she made no attempt to conceal, despite having largely retired from public life. What's particularly significant about Chatterton's preference for younger men is how it reflected her forward-thinking nature in all aspects of life. As a pioneering female aviator who competed in the 1937 Bendix Cup air race, an accomplished novelist, and one of the first actresses to successfully transition from silent films to talkies, Chatterton consistently embraced new challenges rather than clinging to the familiar. Her romantic choices followed this same pattern, seeking partners who offered fresh perspectives rather than comfortable predictability. In a rare 1962 interview reflecting on her life choices, Chatterton stated with characteristic directness, "I've never understood why society expects a woman's vitality, curiosity, and desire to diminish with age while assuming a man's continues unabated. I choose partners who match my energy and interests, regardless of birth date. The calendar seems a particularly arbitrary way to select companions, doesn't it?" 10. Tallulah Bankhead, the rebel who broke every rule. Tallulah Bankhead's flamboyant persona and unapologetic approach to her bisexuality made her one of Hollywood's most controversial figures. Her relationships with men consistently followed a pattern that defied convention. She almost exclusively chose partners 10 to 20 years her junior, a preference she discussed with characteristic frankness. Bankhead's most significant relationship with a younger man began in 1951 when, at age 49, she became involved with 25-year-old actor Keith Buckley during the Broadway run of The Little Foxes. Their 24-year age gap generated considerable scandal, particularly since Bankhead made no attempt to hide either the relationship or her dominant role within it. According to Buckley's later accounts, Bankhead regularly introduced him as "my gorgeous child," a deliberate provocation to society's expectations. What makes Bankhead's case particularly fascinating is her explicit rejection of gender norms regarding age in relationships. As her friend and fellow actress Estelle Winwood recalled, Tallulah used to say, "Darling, if men can rob her cradle, why can't we? I like them young, pretty, and not too bright." She was deliberately mimicking the way powerful men discussed young starlets, turning the objectification back on men to highlight its absurdity. Despite her deliberately provocative public statements, Bankhead's relationships with younger men often showed surprising depth and complexity. Buckley later revealed that behind closed doors, Bankhead was a surprisingly nurturing mentor who actively promoted his career and introduced him to her extensive artistic and literary connections. Their relationship lasted nearly 5 years, significantly longer than most Hollywood marriages of the era. What's particularly significant about Bankhead's preference for younger partners is how openly she connected it to power dynamics. In her autobiography, Tallulah, she wrote with characteristic bluntness, "I've spent my life watching mediocre men rise to positions of authority based on nothing but their gender and connections. If they can use their power to attract younger companions, friends, why shouldn't I? At least I offer something in return. Introductions, education, and a glimpse into worlds they couldn't access otherwise. It's a far more honest exchange than most May-December relationships. Bankhead's friend, Tennessee Williams, later revealed that she had a specific philosophy about age in relationships. Tallulah told me once that she preferred younger men because they hadn't yet been damaged by success or embittered by failure. She said men her age were either too arrogant if they'd succeeded or too resentful if they hadn't, while younger men still possessed hope and enthusiasm, qualities she valued above all else. Now here's what most people don't understand about these golden age actresses and their younger partners. These relationships weren't simply about physical attraction or fear of aging, as gossip columnists often suggested. They represented a sophisticated strategy for navigating the profound gender inequality of Hollywood's studio system. Many of these women had begun their careers under the control of older men, studio heads, directors, and producers who wielded extraordinary power over both their professional and personal lives. Their later preference for younger partners often represented a deliberate recalibration of relationship dynamics after experiencing the constraints of traditional gender roles. Even more revealing, many of these women explicitly connected their preference for younger men to their desire for partners who had known them only at the height of their success and power. Unlike men their own age, who remembered them as struggling ingenues dependent on male approval, younger partners encountered these women as accomplished, financially independent figures whose success was an established fact rather than a threatening development. This created relationships where the women's achievements could be admired without triggering the insecurity and resentment they'd often experienced with same-age or older partners. Understanding this context transforms how we view these pioneering relationships. They weren't signs of desperation or vanity, but strategic choices by women determined to create personal lives that complemented rather than compromised their hard-won professional success. In an era when powerful women were expected to either remain single or subordinate themselves to even more powerful men, these age gap relationships created a third option: partnerships where their strength and achievement could be appreciated rather than resented. We began by asking who these boundary-breaking golden age actresses were who found fulfillment with significantly younger partners, and what their stories reveal about how powerful women navigated romance in an era of rigid gender expectations. What we've discovered is a group of remarkable women who refused to accept the limited romantic options offered to successful actresses of their time. From Gloria Swanson's explicit rejection of men who resented her achievements to Mae West's decades-long partnership with a man nearly 30 years her junior, these women created relationship models that prioritized their needs and ambitions rather than forcing them into traditional gender roles. Their preferences weren't signs of desperation or inappropriate desire, but pragmatic responses to the challenges of finding equal partnerships in a deeply unequal society. What makes these stories particularly significant is how they challenge conventional narratives about older women with younger partners, both in Golden Age Hollywood and today. Far from being exploitative or shallow, many of these relationships showed remarkable longevity and mutual benefit. They weren't last resorts, but deliberate choices by women who had learned through experience what relationship dynamics allowed them to thrive both personally and professionally. These pioneering women recognized something that society still struggles to accept: that traditional expectations about who should partner with whom often serve to maintain unequal power structures rather than facilitate genuine connection. By choosing partners based on compatibility, mutual respect, and shared values rather than adherence to arbitrary age conventions, they created relationships that supported rather than constrained their remarkable lives. As we reflect on these boundary-breaking Hollywood romances, perhaps their most valuable legacy is how they expanded possibilities for women in their wake. By publicly demonstrating that powerful women could find happiness with younger partners, they helped normalize relationships that defied gender conventions, creating space for future generations to make romantic choices based on personal fulfillment rather than social approval. If you appreciated this exploration of Hollywood's hidden history, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content examining the fascinating and sometimes surprising truth behind classic cinema. Leave a comment sharing which of these relationships most intrigued you or suggesting other aspects of Golden Age Hollywood you'd like us to explore. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next journey beyond the glittering facade of Hollywood's Golden Age.